Good evening, everyone. Today we'll be discussing a topic as part of what we started the last time. If you remember very well, last time we tried to clarify the differences between a phrase, a clause, and a sentence. We made some disparities between each of these terms, and then we have one or two examples about them. But today we want to have a clearer picture into one of these aspects. Principally, I want you to know that before you can form a sentence, you start from a word, and then when you bring words together, you form a phrase. When you bring phrases together, you have a clause. Most especially, if you must have a clause, you must have a finite verb in it. So to tell you that for you to have a clause, you need phrases, and at some point, you really need a finite verb. And then by the time you join clauses together, you have a sentence. So today, basically, we want to discuss what a phrase is. We want to look at what a phrase looks like, when we see them, how are they formed, and the different types that we have. I will want to say that we may not be able to finish all the types today, but the little we can finish by chance time, we would like to discuss them. So our topic for today is basically on phrase. Now, what is a phrase? A phrase is a group or combination of two or more words. Now, I want you to pay attention to that. A combination of two or more words. So some school of thought may allow that a word be taken as a phrase in some instances, but we may want to know, or I may want to acknowledge with us today that before you call something a phrase in English language, it should at least have two words or more as you will use in the sentence. So it is a unit of a complete sentence. It forms part of the sentence, but not the whole chunk of its sentence itself. Now, by itself, a phrase is not a complete sentence, or that it does not relay a complete thought. Now, unlike a clause that could relay a thought either partially or in all of its senses, a phrase cannot be taken as a complete sentence, and it does not relate a complete thought. You could have a phrase in a sentence, and in the same sentence, you have a clause. However, a clause may stand as a sentence. If a clause can be used as a sentence, preferably a simple sentence. And that clause we're talking about will be a main clause. But that is not our focus today. Our focus is mainly on a phrase. And so what we are trying to do, what I'm trying to bring as a disparity there is that while a clause can pass a complete message or can express a complete thought, a phrase cannot do that. A phrase is just a unit of a sentence, and then it expresses something that has to do with another part of the sentence. And also to note, it does not contain the subject and the predicate in itself. It may be a subject, it may be part of the predicate, it may be part of other part of a sentence, but in its own sense or in its own compilation, you cannot have a subject and the predicate in a phrase. So don't forget, a phrase is the group of two or more words, and it is a unit, a part of a complete sentence. To put it again, it cannot relay or pass across a complete thought. Rather, it depends on other part of the sentence to have the thought expressed. Okay, from there. Now, let's look into the types of phrases. The types of phrases. So the first one we'll be looking at is the noun phrase. The noun phrase. As a matter of fact, the noun phrase is the most common of all phrases because almost now and every time we use the noun in our sentences or in our expressions. If you go by the definition of a noun is a naming word. So anything that has a name is a noun. Or if I want to go by how it was explained while I was in the primary school, I was told then that a noun is the name of a person, animal, place, or a thing. It could be a thing that I can see with my eyes, that I can touch, that I can move from one place to another, or a thing that I can imagine in my mind or in my head. So now, as much as we have a noun as a part of speech, we have a particular type of phrase that is called a noun phrase. Now, a noun phrase functions as a noun in a sentence. That is, everything that a noun can do in a sentence is what a noun phrase can do. And for you to identify a noun phrase in a sentence, it must have at least one modifier associated to the noun. Now, the modifier we are talking about here may be that it is attached to the noun before it or attached to it after it. That was why we said the modifier can be either a prefix or a suffix. Now, we do not mean the prefix or the suffix in the morphological aspect of it, but we are talking about the placement of this modifier either before, that is prefix, or after the noun, working as a suffix. Now, the entire phrase will act as a noun for that particular sentence with all other determinants that modify the noun. Now, when you're talking about a noun phrase, remember, I said earlier that a noun phrase does not have a predicate in it. So basically, what we are saying is that a noun phrase will not have a finite verb in its composition. It may have a non-finite verb. It may have a gerund in it. It may have a verb in it to infinitive, but it will not have a modifiable verb in it. So when you see a noun phrase, you realize that it cannot pass a complete thought. So every other thing surrounding it is called a modifier. A noun could have 1, 2, 3, 4, as many as we could count modifiers in it. So what you have around it are called modifiers. But note that a noun phrase will not have a finite verb in its composition. Another thing you need to note is that in a noun phrase, the noun is the head word. Now, the head word in a particular composition is that word with the part of speech it carries or the part of speech it can be identified with that bears the body or the name of that composition. So basically, for a noun phrase, anytime you write something and you want to call it a noun phrase or you identify it as a noun phrase, it means there is a noun in that composition that oversees or that our focus is placed on. So this head word is now surrounded by other words that you put after or before the noun. Just as we said earlier, that it may be as a prefix, that is those coming before, or as a suffix, those coming after the noun. Now, so simply said, for you to form a noun phrase is a noun plus several modifiers around it. A noun phrase is a noun plus several other modifiers around it. Now, let's proceed. Now, when we're talking about a noun phrase, there are some examples such that when you come across them in a sentence, it will seem like you don't know how to identify them. Now, For every function that a noun can, for every function that a noun can perform in a sentence, a noun phrase can also perform that. Basically, a noun phrase can act as the subject of a sentence or the subject of a verb. It can act as the object of a verb in a sentence. It can also act as an object of a preposition. And in these sentences that I've given as examples, we have the noun phrase used in each of these functions. For number one, he was wearing a black linen shirt. He was wearing a black linen shirt. Now, a black linen shirt is functioning as an object of the verb wearing. Now, if you look at the composition, a black linen shirt. Now, our head word there, the noun we are talking about there is shirt. We could say he was wearing a shirt. He was wearing a shirt. But for us to have a better knowledge, because we want to modify, we want to talk about the shirt, the quality or what it is made of, and the color. That is why we are bringing those two modifiers. So we have modifier 1 as black, and we have modifier 2 as linen. So that structure, a black linen shirt, is a noun phrase, functioning as the object of the verb wearing. The second one is they lived in a small, tidy cottage. They lived in a small, tidy cottage. Now, in this example, the noun phrase is functioning as the object of the preposition in. It is functioning as the object of the preposition in. So you can see the preposition in, and then you can see the noun phrase coming after it. And you see that in the noun phrase, it is giving a better understanding or a better picture of what the cottage looks like. So you realize that in these formations, as we have them, there is nothing that looks like a verb in it. There is nothing that looks like a verb in it. Moving over to the third one, Alex rode our old bicycle to their shiny new school. Alex rode our old bicycle to their shiny new school. You see there that what we have as the noun phrase there is old bicycle to their shiny new school. Now, in that composition, there is no verb in it. Old is an adjective, bicycle is a noun, to is a preposition, there is a pronoun, shiny is an adjective, new is also an adjective, and school is a noun. Now you see that in that formation, there is no verb in it whatsoever or at all, or there is no finite verb in it. So that proves the fact that in a phrase, there is nothing as a finite verb in it. So in this example, what we have there as a noun phrase is just what we have brought together, different words that we have brought together, and our focus there is the bicycle. We could say Alex rode a bicycle. Alex rode a bicycle. But for us to modify the type of bicycle it is and to give other information, that was why we are surrounded with some other things. And it is functioning as the object of the verb. Now, the last example that we have for this type of phrase is the black car got towed. The black car got towed. Now, here it is functioning as the object of the verb got towed. It is functioning as the subject of the verb got towed. Now, the noun phrase is the car. So the black is telling us the color. So we could say the car got towed. The car got towed. But because we want to modify, we want to know the type of color. So basically, modifiers will give more descriptions about the end word that we are using in that sentence, or sorry, in the phrase, or in any composition that we have it. So the first example was giving us a noun phrase as an object of a verb. And then our Edward in that noun phrase is shirts. The second one is also coming in as the object of a preposition. The preposition is in, and what comes after it is the object of that preposition. So a noun phrase can function as the subject of a verb. It can function as the object of a verb. It can also function as object of a preposition. And all of these we have given as examples in this part. So when you come across a noun phrase, you should be able to note that a noun will be the Edward, and then around it you add modifiers. It may come before or it may come after. And such that there will be a noun that is standing as the Edward in that composition. And note also that there will be nothing like a finite verb in that composition. Moving on from there, the next one is the verb phrase. Now, basically, for us to have a clause or a sentence, we must have a finite verb. However, when we are writing a sentence generally, we may just use a verb, and then when you form a sentence with one verb, we may call it a simple sentence, or preferably it's a simple sentence. However, by the time we are writing some sentences, we may need more than one verb. We may need multiple verbs. So in a case where you have more than one verb, that collection of verbs and one.
Was it current use before or savings? If it was.
Now, I was saying that they have been playing since the last 2 hours. Now, so we have 3 verbs there. We have 2 auxiliary verbs and a main verb in the continuous form, or what we call the progressive form. So for these, bringing these 3 together, we have what we call a verb phrase. So remember that a verb phrase is when you bring an auxiliary verb and a main verb together in a sentence to be used. And the third one is you must call your mom at once. There we have a modal auxiliary verb and a main verb in the bare infinitive form. We have a modal auxiliary verb and a main verb in the bare infinitive form. And the last one is he has taken the dog along. He has taken the dog along. There you have a verb, an auxiliary verb, have in the third person singular, and then you have a main verb, take, in the past participle. So those are examples of what we call the verb phrase. So when you see 1, 2, when you see 2, 3 or more verbs used in a sentence, pardon me, let me come back on that. When you see 2, that is an auxiliary and a main verb, or you have more, maybe 2 auxiliaries and a main verb, or you have an auxiliary and 2 main verbs in a sentence, the combination, that group, is called a verb phrase. So when you see them in sentences, you should be able to identify them as the name implies. Now, moving up from there is a prepositional phrase. Now, basically, a prepositional phrase is headed by a preposition. The important thing about a prepositional phrase is that a prepositional phrase does not exist on its own just by using a preposition. Rather, it must have a noun phrase attached to it, acting as the object of that preposition. Now, what we're trying to say is this. If you are identifying a prepositional phrase in a sentence, the preposition will be there, and then it will always have a noun phrase or a noun as the object to it, such that that can be used to complete it. For instance, if I put up the sentence, he lived in, and then I keep quiet. Now, that is not a complete thought. However, in that sentence, we could add something to have a prepositional phrase. So if I now say he lived in a cottage, he lived in a cottage. Now, a cottage there is a noun phrase, and then acting as the object to a preposition. So by the time you now identify the preposition and the noun phrase in its totality, you have a prepositional phrase. So such a phrase also at times consists of other modifiers describing the object of the prepositional phrase. Now, there are some things we need to note about the prepositional phrase. These are some of the examples. You see the first one, students are advised to be on time. On is a preposition, time is a noun. But because we need a noun to act as the object of that preposition so that we can use both together, that is why we have on time highlighted. The second one says, please turn towards the right at the intersection. Now, basically, we have two there, but I just want to identify one so that we can know that the other two can work too. Now, the first one is, please turn towards the right. Now, you realize that towards is a preposition. The right is a noun phrase. So the noun phrase is acting as the object to the preposition. So bringing everything together, we have a prepositional phrase. Another one is at the intersection. Now, at is a preposition. The intersection is a noun phrase. Bringing everything together, we have a prepositional phrase. So in a sentence, it is possible you have more than one prepositional phrase. It is possible you have more than one prepositional phrases. So by the time you see them, you should be able to identify them and know what they are all about. Now, there are some things you need to note about the prepositional phrase, such that when you see them, you can use them better, other than just saying that they are just prepositional phrases. Now, the first one is that there are certain times where a prepositional phrase acts as an adjective for a sentence. It will also always give an answer to the question, which one? Now look at the examples that we have. Please get the book above the cupboard. Please get the book above the cupboard. The question will be, which book? And then you would see that it is what? The one above the cupboard. The one above the cupboard. So now that prepositional phrase is trying to act as an adjective describing the book. So a prepositional phrase can also act as what? As an adjective. Remember, an adjective will always describe or get us more information about a noun. Now, in this sentence that we have, combination. Above is a preposition. The cupboard is a noun phrase. Now, the cupboard is a noun phrase acting as the object to the preposition above. So, but this combination here is working as an adjective for the noun or the noun phrase, the book. The second one says that the student at the end of the line is misbehaving again. The question is, which student? So, which student? Now, at the end of the line is describing the student. The statement or the expression at the end of the line, which is a prepositional phrase, is describing the student. So, at is the preposition. The end of the line is a phrase that is acting as the object of the preposition, and then it is functioning as an adjective because it is describing which student is misbehaving again. Further, we sometimes a prepositional phrase can also function as an adverb of a sentence. It answers the question how, where, or when. So anytime you have an expression and then it is posing any of this question, how, where, and when, you can use a prepositional phrase for your answer. Now, the first example, the cat is hiding behind the tree. The question is, where is the cat? Or we can say, where is the cat hiding? Then the prepositional phrase is used as an adverb to tell us the adverb of place, answering the question, where. Now, the second one, the family headed to church after breakfast. The family headed to church after breakfast. When did the family leave? So the prepositional phrase there is actually answering the question when the family left for church. And that was after the breakfast. So when you see a prepositional phrase, you can either have them working as an adjective or you see them working as an adverb. So that is where we will stop today. I would just want us to have a quick revision on what we've been discussing. We've been discussing about a phrase, and then we've said a phrase is a group or combination of two or more words. It is a part or a unit of a sentence. In its own, it is not a complete sentence, and it cannot express a complete thought. Why? Because it does not have a subject and a predicate in itself. And then we'll talk about the types of phrases that we have. We have a noun phrase, which acts as a noun in a sentence with other things, and then a noun stands as the head word in that phrase. The second one is the verb phrase. Bringing two or more verbs together to be used in a sentence, we have what we call a verb phrase. The third one is a prepositional phrase. I would say a prepositional phrase is a preposition and a noun or a noun phrase, which the noun works or functions as the object of that preposition, and then it works in a sentence. A prepositional phrase can act as an adjective for anything in the sentence or act as an adverb in a sentence. So that is where we'll stop for today. Now, my assignment will be that try to get some sentences, or while you're reading a particular text or a passage, try as much as possible to identify each of these phrases that we have discussed today. So the next time we'll meet, we'll discuss about the other types of phrases that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. But do you have any questions? The students, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Okay, in the absence of question, we'll be ending the class.